Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Manhunter, starring William L. Peterson, Kim Grice, Joan Allen, Brian Cox, Dennis Farina, Stephen J. Lang, Tom Noonan, and David Seaman, and directed by Michael Mann. Not a popular director I like to talk about too much, but. And I am reviewing Hannibal Lecter's movies and not the TV show with Mads Mikkelsen. That's its own thing, but and I haven't seen it myself, and I'm may be planning on it. Maybe we'll see after the series, but this is a character based off of a Thomas Harris novel fiction story. So, have I seen this movie before? No, but I've seen the other ones. Let's get into this one, and we'll see what this is like. We start the movie off with a day on the beach with Jack Crawford, played by Dennis Farina, giving Will Graham, played by William L. Peterson, a photo of his family as his wife Molly, played by Kim Grice, and his son Kevin, played by David Seaman, come to them after a swim. As I get the impression they live at the beach, as Molly asked Jack they should have left them alone as they're kissing at night in bed. And Will goes on a trip to solve a murder, and I can tell I'm already in for a bumpy ride, but at the same time, I wish Silence of the Lambs was first, because one way I can start off with a much better movie. Will records himself with a tape recorder like detectives do in general, and the acting is pretty bad by William Peterson as he monologues to himself while solving a crime with a tape recorder, as these scenes are very badly shot, and it's better than what Michael Mann does in the future. And honestly, this movie is going absolutely nowhere. Where Will has to get a serial killer called the Tooth Fairy behind bars as he's out in the wilderness, and as they leave a meeting, Will, Jack, and Jack, I'll say, get encountered by Freddie Lowndes, played by Stephen Lang, as he want before he was ever in Avatar or Don't Breathe, as he wants to get some information from Will, and I don't like these characters, nor do I understand this movie and its plot. Will goes to prison and visits Dr. Hannibal Lecter, played by Brian Cox, before he was ever famous from X-Men 2 and all those other things, as it's spelled with a K, and honestly, he's no Anthony Hopkins, as his take on the character is pretty damn bad. He's barely in this movie, too, might I add. And I'm doing the series based on Hannibal Lecter, and he's barely in this fucking thing. As Will asks Dr. Lecter to help him a little about the Tooth Fairy, and when he gives Hannibal the papers about him, he learns about him as a small child, and as he was shy, and hopefully this will explain why, and if not, Red Dragon can do it better than this movie when I get there. Hannibal torments Will, and as he runs out, Freddy catches him and puts him in the newspaper as he calls Will a manhunter, while Hannibal calls to get Will's number and his home address, and I'm unsure how this plot will go as this movie is pretentious. Will files to a different location, or flies to a different location, as he scares a little girl on the airplane, and he arrives at a house, and after he sees it, he randomly walks backwards. For what reason? I'm not sure, and he climbs a rope to a tree to find a view from the bedroom, and how fucking creepy is that, despite nobody lives at that house for now, as this movie doesn't thrill me. It more sickened me, I would say. The warden finds a note from Will from Hannibal and calls Jack and Will about the note from a mysterious person whom I'm led to believe is Hannibal himself, but says a different name which I can't remember off the top of my head. And this movie is fucking boring, but the not the worst boring like Screamers, but I'm still bored. They take notes from the letter to the mystery person named Avid from Jonah as they try something, and if it doesn't work, Will has no choice but to bait himself as one guy is against it, as we learn the Tooth Fairy has a molested males in his pants, which is horribly disturbing, while Will doesn't have a choice but to take a picture with Freddy. And remind me, what was the point of these scenes? Because I sure as hell don't know. Will goes outside as bait to flips a jogger over, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is happening? While Freddy goes to a car to only get captured by the Tooth Fairy, as he shows pictures of the Red Dragon and a photo of him with Will and tells him to read a note to Will on a tape recorder and rips his nose off screen, whereas in the Red Dragon they'll show it, but barely. And Michael Mann can't shoot a torture scene worth a shit, as I didn't like the way it was shown how he got tortured as he gets wheeled while on fire, which was very bad looking. I think they'll do it better back in forward in 2002, I'll say. Will hears from Jack the bastard has Will's address as his son sees someone outside and gets his mother involved as Molly sees the person and a cop shows up and tells her to go back inside as he takes Molly and Kevin to a cabin. And I do like the images on the wall as Will takes Kevin to the grocery store and tells him about how he got Hannibal behind bars, which will be shown in Red Dragon, sure. But it was nice to use your imagination in a movie from the 1980s, let's say. Will talks with Molly about how he's going to Atlanta to stop the Tooth Fairy from killing people and sends her and Kevin to her father's in Montana. While he works on getting the Tooth Fairy, we meet Francis Dollarhide, played by Tom Noonan, at a diner, and I'm thinking he must be the Tooth Fairy killer. I mean, come on that it's that obvious. He goes to the office of Reba McClane, played by Joan Allen, as she gives him some type of drug in 4 days, as he's offered Reba a ride home, and we learn from the movie that she's blind. And he takes care of her, and he takes her to a zoo where she touches the tiger, and she feels a heartbeat, or hears it too, I'll say, which is a nicely shot scene, as she doesn't know it's a tiger. She touched it, and I sort of like that scene as Joan Allen pulls off Blind Woman off very well. Francis and Reba have dinner together as he's watching a video clip of a woman's skin, and he wants to touch Reba, as I get the impression he's in love with Reba, and they have sexual intercourse as we sort of use our imagination, I'll say again. We see an image of outer space on the wall is a pretty good shot, and as I'm looking at the scenes with Francis and Reba, much better than the Will's scenes for the first hour and 10 minutes into the movie. We spend a lot of time with Will as he's a terrible character. They wake up next morning and see a beautiful sunrise shot as it moves towards Francis and Reba, and it's a pretty damn good shot. We go back to Will, and it's moving slowly back and forth from Will to Francis and Reba. And I'm going, blah, blah, blah. Will calls Hannibal on the phone, and Brian Cox is acting as Hannibal the Cannibal Lecter is not his best work, in my opinion. And as I said earlier, he's no Anthony Hopkins. Will sees a woman's eyes and mouth cut like a piece of paper, which looked pretty plastic. Then we move back on Francis going to Reba's house and sees another man kissing her, which makes Francis heartbroken as she shoots the man dead and captures Reba as he dreams to be wanted and desired, and that's when the romance ends, and this guy is going back to being a creep. And we move on back to Will as he gets closer to the Tooth Fairy, and Will and Jack have an argument about how late they're working and learns that the Tooth Fairy has a bolt cutter. Looks familiar to Will, and I'm starting to lose my interest, and I'm not checked out, I'm just bored, and this is going to be done better when I get to Red Dragon. Will learns to his target is Francis as Reba tortures her, as Will looks for Francis while on an airplane to St. Louis, and Francis tortures Reba some more as she's almost dead as the cops arrive, and Will can't wait for the backup as he comes and bursts in the house from the window and fights up with Francis as he's the Tooth Fairy carrier, which is so goddamn obvious. Come on. As when they shoot at each other, the editing during the action scenes were moving too quick, which was the 1980s, but it's bad looking, as Will shoots Francis dead, and I hope as hell this is about to be done, because this movie is absolutely fucking terrible. Will kills the Tooth Fairy, reunites with Molly and Kevin, and I thought, big deal, I wish this movie was either over or done at this point. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 3.0 out of 10. With an exception of a few scenes, the movie was shot poorly as Michael Mann tells the story rather poorly compared to Red Dragon with Brett Ratner, which I don't remember how that movie goes when I get there. The acting is bad for sure, as I don't like the characters except for Reba, but Will comes off like a scumbag. Brian Cox's Hannibal is no Anthony Hopkins, not by a long shot. I just wish that I started off with Silence of the Lambs, as I couldn't start off with a much higher note than this movie did. But I'll get there next time. But for now, this movie was boring and I'll never watch it again. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back next time for Silence of the Lambs. And until then, is this Clarice? Well, hello, Clarice.